Hello Internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I feel like I'm really late to the game on this one, like super late. Everyone's always praised this book. I remember when it first came out and everyone's like, oh, you just have to go read this is so good. It's just like such a 5-star book. You would hear it from mainstream readers, you would hear it from book communities, like everyone just wanted you to go and read this book. And I'm sad to say I never read this book because I actually had it confused with a book by Cornelia Funke, and that was something along the title of Book Thief or Thief of something. I'll like try to find a picture of that book so that you can see what I'm talking about. I had tried to read that book by her. I ended up getting really bored and then just like DNFing it. So I had confused the two, thought they were the same book, so that when everyone was talking about this book, I was like, well, I think I already read that and I didn't like it. So like that's my little story of why I'm saying that it took so long to read The Book Thief. But I did it, and I gotta say it's a pretty good book. I can see why everybody loved it. So The Book Thief, in case you did not hear the hype all those years ago about it, takes place during World War II in Germany when it slowly becomes Nazi Germany. It's told from the perspective of Death as he recounts the life of a young girl who he fondly remembers as the book thief. Since she was a young girl and was sent off to the countryside to get away from like the main warring, ingested portions of the city, ends up stealing a lot of books and learning the power of words and reading. Her books are her life. Her life is surrounded by books, and it's just Death recounting what he remembers of her, from seeing her steal the very first book to seeing the book that she wrote herself. So this is a very, very interesting book. I think my favorite part about this was that we got to see from the perspective of Death. We got to see his thoughts and opinions on everything, and while he would stick mostly to the story, there were a few points that he drew back and he was like, well, this is what I do as Death, these are the thoughts I have as Death. And I thought that Death was a pretty awesome character, and I really like seeing him tell a story, and I would be intrigued to see a Death sort of narrative from more stories because it was really interesting. Now, as for the book thief herself, I thought that that was pretty cool too. I like seeing how she slowly learned the power of words, how at first it was just her taking something because she thought it was interesting, to her slowly learning how to read, her struggles with it, and then her just taking these powers of words and seeing how important they were, especially in Nazi Germany, where we know Hitler used his voice and his charisma and the words that he chose to entrance a whole country. So I liked seeing this progress. I like seeing that we are staying in Germany and we're seeing how Nazi Germany affected the Germans and them around them, how they reacted to them. I think a lot of World War II stories that we see usually are from the outside looking in as Germany as this horrible monster, but here we get to see a small town within it, and we get to see the type of people that lived in Germany at this time. So it really gives you a different perspective of you just like taking in this world. It really reminds me of like that Captain America First Avengers quote when that guy says, people soon forget that the first country that Hitler conquered was Germany itself. So we really like get that perspective where we see how the Germans react to having Hitler in power in this small countryside town that's kind of devoid from the big city and all of the marches. So I like this book. I think it was a good book. I think it's like a 5-star book, but it's not my 5-star book. And by this I mean, like, I could recognize it as a really good book. I could recognize that it was like well written, that the story was very compelling, but it didn't like hit me here. It like up here I recognize it as 5 stars, but like in my heart it's not a 5-star book. So I can't, like, I can't really, I don't know what I'm supposed to say about this book. Like, I appreciate that I read it. I appreciate I got a story out of it, but it didn't like hit me in the heart in the way that I expected it to, based on like all of these different opinions rolling out there about The Book Thief. I do think objectively it's a good story, and I think like more people should read it and at least try. But for me personally, it wasn't one of those books that like hit me hard and made me cry. And I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that, because unlike other people, I cry a lot. Like, I cry if I stub my toe. I cry if like somebody looks at me wrong. Like, I don't seem like it, but when it comes to like movies, television, entertainment, and stories, it's like a catharsis for me in which I cry a lot, like at the littlest, slightest thing. And like, I'm that person who like acts out scenes because I get really passionate and emotional about those things. So when I read this book and I expected it to do that, it didn't, and I can't really say much. Like, I don't understand why it didn't when so many people are like, oh, this is such a moving story, and I'm just like, well, okay, she stole some books, so what? Alright. There were a few moments where I was just like, oh, that's sad, but it didn't pull me to tears. And as a person who tends to cry over like battle scenes because I get like so hyped up in the moment, it surprised me. So for that reason, I can't say that this is a 5-star book for me, even though I acknowledge it objectively as a really, really good book. I think the best part for me about this was the narration of death. I think that if it wasn't narrated as death, I might not have enjoyed it as much as I did. I just liked hearing Death's perspective and his little commentary throughout the story of what he was saying to these people. But other than that, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to say, because it's like a pretty self-explanatory. It's about this girl. She steals a bunch of books. She lives in Germany during World War II, and it just recounts her life and Death talking about her and how he envisions and how he remembers her life and all the little things that went on during it. And yeah, so it's a 5-star book objectively, but it didn't move me to tears as I expected it to. And that's all I can really say. I don't know what more. Like, I kind of feel bad because, like, it's one of those books that I just heard everyone talking about. And everyone's like, it's such a great book. You need to read it. You're gonna end up crying. And I'm just like, well, okay. Like, it was sad, but no tears from me. And now I kind of get what other booktubers talk about when they're like, well, everyone said this book made me cry, but I didn't, so am I heartless? And I'm just like, I know I'm not heartless, but this book just didn't make me cry. So take my opinion with like a little grain of salt. I don't think this book is like a crying book personally, but it's objectively good. It is. It is an objectively good book. So I read this on audiobook, and I would suggest that I would say that the audiobook for this is really, really good. The only downside to reading the audiobook for this is that this does have some illustrations in it of a story that is illustrated by somebody that the book thief comes to care about. And it's like, I don't know, like there's small illustrations, there's nothing like really big or like rough to them, but there are, let me see if I can find one real quick. But there are some illustrations done. So if you're reading the audiobook, you never realize that there are these illustrations that are done. You just hear the words, you never get to see the pictures. So that's the only downside I would say to consuming this book on audio form. The audiobook is done fine, and it's like, it's a good audiobook. However, you lose all the illustrations that happen in this book when you do that. So I don't know, like, keep a physical copy around if you listen to it on audiobook so that you can kind of flip through and keep track of where you are, or just read the book itself so that you don't lose that benefit of having those illustrations that kind of add to the story. So that's just the one thing I would kind of want you guys to be aware of when you go into this book, in case like that is something that you're particular about. So if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunny bunnies down below, and goodbye, internet.